This is the final share of this year's edition of the Yemei Iyun, and I'm very happy to be the closer here. My shul in Katamon and previously in Ramot, the Gavayim invite me to be the Shliach Tzibur for Nila and Yom Kippur. And Nila, the Shliach Tzibur for Nila has to know two things. Number one, to daven quickly, and two, to finish on time. So I'm going to try to keep to those two directives for this Ne'ilah Shiur for this Yom Iyun season. Pesach Sheini has a biblical side, has a midrash side, and has a halachic side. Not always do these intersect, but I believe that in this particular narrative, in trying to determine the essence of Pesach Sheini, we're going to see that in order to fundamentally understand what this Chag is, if it's at all a Chag, Pesach Sheini, how do we to understand it, and in what areas could there be an overlap from the midrashic interpretation of the biblical text and perhaps some halachot that go along with it. To many, Pesach Sheini is nothing more than a marker in the calendar of one of the days we don't say Tachnun. And to that end, we're all very happy if it falls out on a Monday or Thursday, because we save about 3.5 minutes of the morning davening. It never on Thursday, but it happens on Monday. We will see that the business of not saying Tachnun on Pesach Sheini is a rather recent, and I say recent, maybe 150 years old phenomenon, and it has something to do with the discussion of the essence of Pesach Sheini. So let's just begin with the biblical narrative. Normally a mitzvah is introduced with a Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Daber b'nei Yisrael, speak to b'nei Yisrael, and here's the mitzvah. This particular commandment enters into the picture as a result of a story. In Bamidbar Perek Tet, which is Parshat Balotcha, Shlishi of Parshat Balotcha, so the text tells us, "Vaydaber Hashem Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'shana hashenit letzeit b'nei Yisrael miMitzrayim meretz Mitzrayim b'chodesh harishon lemor." And it was the second year, a year after Yetziat Mitzrayim, in the desert, on the first month, which we call Nisan. V'ya'asu v'nei Yisrael et ha'pasach b'moado. A reminder that which is talked about in Parshat Bo and Sefer Shmot, now's the season. In the 15th of Nisan, you will have the Yom Tov of Chag HaMatzot, and on the 14th of Nisan, you will have Pesach. The Torah never calls Pesach what we call Pesach. What we call Pesach is Chag HaMatzot. Pesach is the 14th of Nisan, the day of the offering of the Korban Pesach. Now it's eaten at night with matzah and maror, al matzot umrorim yochluhu, the night of the 15th. But the offering of the Korban Pesach is on what we call Erev Pesach. So the same would happen, this is what the Torah reports, a year later after Yetziat Mitzrayim, B'arba'asar b'chodesh hazeh ben arbayim, tasu oto b'moado, ki chol chukotav v'chol mishpatav tasu oto. And on the 14th, this is a reminder, you should prepare the Korban Pesach. Vaydaber Moshe el b'nei Yisrael lasot ha'pasach. And Moshe Rabbeinu repeats, teaches b'nei Yisrael, and reminds them about the Korban Pesach. Vayasu et ha'pesach barishon, and they performed this Korban Pesach. They offered the Korban Pesach in that first month, ba'arba'asar yom lachodesh ben arbayim, and on the 14th, ben arbayim. It's just interesting. It's not the subject of my shir, but ben arbayim has a biblical connotation and has a halachic connotation. The biblical connotation of Ben Arbayim, that can be proven from other biblical narratives, is what we call in the halacha Ben Hashmashot, between sundown and nightfall. However, halachically, Ben Arbayim here means the afternoon until Shkia, until nightfall. And the Ibn Ezra actually believes that the reason that the Torah refers to the time framework of the offering of the Korban Pesach as Ben Arbayim, because the intention is to eat it at night, so that the slaughtering and the offering of the Korban Pesach was done, even though it was done in the afternoon hours, but the mindset is 9 times. So it's already called Ben Ha'arbayim. And the Torah reports, yes, Vayasu et Pesach, they did bring the offering Korban Pesach on the 14th. B'midbar Sinai, Kichol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, ken asu b'nei Yisrael. End of story. And now something happens. Vayhi anashim asher hayu tmeim lenefesh adam, v'lo yachlu lasot haPesach bayom hahu. There were those who are tumat met, tamei met. It means they were defiled because they either came in contact with a corpse or were holding the aron, the coffin of a dead body, or were in a ohel, a building with a roof where the dead body was there, and they became tamei met. And a person who's tamei met cannot partake in the Korban Pesach, and that already is taught to us back in Parshat Bo. So here these people came, and they said, 1 second, what about us? We also would like to partake in the Korban Pesach. Vayikruvu lifnei Moshe, they came to Moshe, v'lifnei Aaron bayom hahu, vayamru anashim ha'ema elav, and they began protesting. Anachnu tmeim lenefesh adam. Yes, this is the case. But lama nigara levilti hakriv et korban Hashem b'moado b'toch b'nei Yisrael. Why should we be left out? This is Pashut knocking on the door and saying that we would like to have a part of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. Now it's interesting that today, that we are almost 2,000 years away from the time zone of Korban Pesach since the destruction. To us, Leila Seder is matzah, maror, and knedlach. But nobody thinks, oh, Nebuch, I didn't have a Korban Pesach this year. Well, that's what we should be thinking on Seder night. And remember, Rav Yoel Ben Nun, one of the great teachers here of Tanakh, when he said that people sing V'hi she'amda lavotenu, so shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chalotenu, shebechol dov ador amdim aleinu l'chalotenu, should be sung in the nigun of Eicha. Because that's what it's all about. Shebechol dov ador amdim aleinu l'chalotenu, that dor vador is a restatement of Milchemet Amalek. Milchama l'Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. Every generation has its Amalek. And every generation, the Amalek dresses up in a different costume, which might be the source of Purim costumes, by the way. That Amalek dressed up in that generation as Haman. But Amalek dresses up in different generations in different garb. But it's the same old Amalek. We can see through the costumes. Milchama l'Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. And you sit down to Leila Seder, and you spend an arm and a leg on the Pesach shopping, and everything's beautiful, everything's done, and you're supposed to be half happy and half sad. Sad because there's no Beit HaMikdash, and there's no Korban Pesach. And here, these people, this is year 2, right after Yetziat Mitzrayim, a year after Yetziat Mitzrayim, and they feel horrible that they're going to miss out on the central mitzvah of Leila Seder, of eating Korban Pesach, because they're Tamei Meit. And they asked Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's interesting, Moshe Rabbeinu does not have an answer. Vayomer alehem Moshe, imdu ve'eshma'a ma yitzaveh Hashem lachem. Well, putting it bluntly, I have to ask a shaila. He has to ask a question. There are only several points in the Torah where Moshe Rabbeinu has to ask a shaila. In one of the shurim I heard this morning, so there was a reference to the Mekoshesh Eitzim, B'Yom HaShabbat, and Rav Meidan Shir. So there too, there was an act of Chilul Shabbat, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know Ma Yiforash, what exactly should be done. He had to ask. And also with regard to the inheritance of the daughters of Tzlofchad. Have to ask, which in itself teaches us something, that even Moshe Rabbeinu occasionally had to ask a shaila. That's very important. It's very important what I just said. Asking questions is an integral part of the whole experience of Talmud Torah. And here you get the response, which is very standard, and the Torah could have begun with this standard opening, V'daber Hashem Moshe lemor, daber b'nei Yisrael lemor, ish ki yeh tameh lenefesh b'derech o b'derech hochoka. Yes. If there's a man who's tameh, or if he's far away. Now that's a very, very open-ended phrase, far away. How far away from Yerushalayim? So the Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim deals with distances. There's one opinion, by the way, that it's a radius around Yerushalayim, that the western side of the radius is Modi'in. So if you happen to be living in Chashmonaim and Modi'in, you're right on the border. You're right there. But you have to loop around, and it's going to go beyond Maleh Adumim on the east. So Ma'ale Adumim is considered derech krova, is already too close, so you cannot excuse yourself. But Tel Aviv is certainly out of the pale, and for sure Beersheva and Eilat and Ramat Golan and so on. But actually Chazal didn't speak of distances. They used distances and locations to talk about the distance that one can travel in a day's time. Well, my son, when we lived in Ramot, went to Chashmonoim, he thought the car was a jet, and he made it in 20 minutes. Okay. But to travel 25 hours from Yerushalayim, 24 hours from Yerushalayim, that might include Tokyo, right? If you have a supersonic jet, for sure. There's no question about that. So in the days of Bayit Shlishi, the distance of Derech Rechoka is going to have to be redefined in light of modern day transportation, but that we're going to leave to the Sanhedrin. We don't have to deal with it. Sanhedrin will break their heads on this one as to what would consider Derech Rechoka. I have a hunch it means the moon and Mars and other places. That will be really Derech Rechoka. But anywhere on planet Earth, you can get to Yerushalayim within 24 hours, unless there's a strike, you know, which can happen. So the Torah says, if there's Derech Tamid Lenefesh or Derech Rechoka, Vasa Pesach, what do? On the second month, B'chodesh HaSheni, you bring the Korban Pesach on the 14th of the second month of Iyar, and on that night, you eat it with matzah and maror. Now, Torah does not say that you repeat Chag HaMatzot. It doesn't say that for 7 days you have Yom Tov, a day of Yom Tov and the Chol HaMoed, another day Yom Tov, and there's no Melacha on the first day and on the seventh day, and there's Isur Chometz. None of that for the month of Iyar. Because that person who was in China or in Tel Aviv, Derech Rechoka from beyond Modi'in, he also made Pesach. What kind of Pesach? Exactly the way we make Pesach. He cleaned house for Chametz, and he had Yom Tov on the first day, on the last day, and he had Matzah and Moror, and had Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, had the Haggadah. The only thing that was missing was the Korban Pesach. And the only thing that has to be, if we say made up, is the Korban Pesach, and that's what's made up. So Pesach Sheini is not a Yom Tov. There's no Isa Malocha. A person can have the Korban Pesach, on that person who was not there for Nisan, can have the Korban Pesach in Iyar, and have his matzah and moror with the Korban Pesach, and eat bread at that same meal. There's no Isur, there's no prohibition of chametz at all. So that tells us that it's not a Yom Tov per se. So this is really the basic biblical text of Pesach Sheni. What Chazal were concerned about, before we get to some halachic issues, is the identity of the Anashim Asher Hayu Tme'im Lenefesh Adam. If you take a look at source number 7. Source number 7 in the source page, the second page in the middle. It's a Gemara that's found in Masechet Sukkah, Daf Kaf Hey, the bottom of Kaf Hey Amud Aleph, and it goes on to Amud Bet. And it tells us an interesting midrash about the identity. And as Nacham Leibowitz Alei Shalom always taught, whenever the midrash has different opinions about who people were or what was said, it doesn't mean that there were 3 camera crews there and each one taking it from a different angle, and somebody caught this person, somebody caught that person, or somebody had a tape recorder with regard to Cain and Hevel, Vahi biotam basadeh, Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. They were in the field, and Cain was talking to Hevel, and next thing you know, Cain kills Hevel. So what were they talking about? So the Medrash says this, the Medrash says that, Medrash says that, 3 different things that we put into the mouthpiece of Cain and Hevel. Anybody standing there with a tape recorder? No. This is Chazal trying to teach us something about the anatomy of a murder, the motivational factors that govern murder. And Chazal put it one way, and others put it another way, and that's how we have to understand many of these midrashim. So too, no, we were not there in the Midbar. So was it A, was it B, was it C? From the point of view of the pshat of the psukim, it doesn't make a bit of a difference. They were anashim, they were people, whoever they were, they were. Chazal now come and teach us that it could be A or B or C, and then we can learn something about the nature of Pesach Sheni by solving the question of the identity of the anashim. So who are they, according to Chazal? Source 7. Vayi anashim asher hayu tmeim lenefesh adam. Otam anashim mi hayu. Who are those people? Suggestion number 1. Nosei arono shel Yosef hayu. We know that Yosef dies in Mitzrayim, and he's buried in Mitzrayim. irrespective of the medrash that he was buried in the Nilus, in the Nile, but that's also called burial, by the way. Burial at sea is also called kfura. So he was buried in Mitzrayim. But before he dies, at the end of Sefer Bereshit, he makes the family swear that they won't leave him, that they'll retrieve him, just as Yaakov does also. Don't leave me here in Mitzrayim. And Moshe Rabbeinu, at the beginning of Parshat Bishalach, fulfills this. The Torah says it very clearly that he's busy, he's occupied with retrieving Atzmot Yosef. And they're going to bring it to Eretz Yisrael to burial in Shechem.
Didn't Moshe carry them all the way?
One second, we'll get to that. That doesn't say that in the Chumash. That's a medrash. Imo b'mechitzato. That's a medrash. We have to, many times, we have to filter out that which we've studied as youngsters in Rashi, whereas Nechama used to tell us, sometimes Rashi became the pasuk, where we forget that Rashi is Rashi and the pasuk is the pasuk. So we're not saying Rashi's wrong, God forbid. We're saying Rashi is offering a view in the Midrash, in Rashi's opinion, closely related to the Pshat. That's how Nechama understood it. But as you know, there are other Parshanim and there are other Midrashim. So in the meantime, all we know is that Moshe Rabbeinu looks out to attend to the idea that the bones of Yosef have to be brought. But this Gemara is suggesting that there were those who had the assignment of carrying the Aron, the coffin of the bones of Yosef. So they were Tamei Meit, as simple as that. And we know that you have to have 7 days of Para Aduma to become Tahor. And the question was, the practicality here, was there enough time for any of these people to become Tehorim in order to eat the Korban Pesach in Nisan in its proper time? So we'll see. Let's examine who the three are. That's number one, Nosei Aron Nosha Yosef. That's Rabbi Yosef Glili. Rabbi Akiva says it was Mishael and Eltzafan Hayu. Those are the two who in Parshat Sheini, after the tragic deaths of Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, so Mishael and Eltzafan are instructed by Moshe to bring them to Kvura. So they're now burying their cousin, essentially, cousins, Nadav and Avihu, and they're Tmei Meit. So they can't eat the Korban Pesach either. Shayu Asukim bin Nadav Avihu. One second. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Im Nosei Aronosha Yosef Hayu, Kvar Hayu Yucholim Litaher. One second. This parsha opens up on what is the date. What does it say in the beginning of this section of Perek Tet? It says Bashana Shinit, right? But it also says Vayedaber Shel Moshe b'Sina b'Shana Shinit Tzeit Meisrael b'Chodesh Harishon Lemor. Now we don't have an exact date here, but there is an impression that if it doesn't say a date, it's Rosh Chodesh. There are not all agree with this, but it could be it's Rosh Chodesh. And there's no doubt that the comment that's made here by the Gemara, that if this occurred on Rosh Chodesh, then those who were carrying the Aron of Yosef had 2 weeks' time to become Tehorim, so it can't be them. And if it was Mishael and Eltzafan, Yecholim Hayu Litaher. When exactly did Nadav and Avihu die? On Rosh Chodesh Nisan? Maybe. But let's assume it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. They also have 2 weeks to become Tahor. So we're eliminating the first two suggestions. So the third suggestion says, Rabbi Yitzchak, Ela oskim b'meit mitzvah hayu. What is meit mitzvah? When I was a kid in yeshiva, so meit mitzvah was always associated with either a kohen gadol or a nazir just happened to come on a corpse in the field with no identity, and on the spot there's a mitzvah for them to bury that dead body, even though a kohen and a nazir are not to become tamei meit for anybody, not even for their own parents. The aviv l'imo lo yitama. So that's like the exceptional cause. But Rashi tells us in Masechet Sukkah, and the Rambam clearly in Hilchot Evel, that every single person who sustains the loss of one of the 7 immediate relatives, who he or she is obligated to bring to Kfura and to sit Shiva, that is called Meit Mitzvah. Because many people die any given day. It's not a particular mitzvah for everybody to run to the hospital and start burying everybody who dies in the hospital that day. It's the obligation, the principal obligation, of the immediate relatives who are going to sit Shiva. They have the obligation to bring to Kfura, And Rashi and Rambam call this Meit Mitzvah. And that's what Rashi says here. What do you think, the Malach HaMavet was on strike in the first week of Nisan or the second week of Nisan? People died. People died in the Midbar. So they were anonymous people. We don't have to know their names and their Tudat Zehut numbers, who they were. They were Jews, Bnei Israel, whose parents or sister or brother, somebody died, and within a week before Pesach, and they were the ones who came to Moshe, Lama Nigara, what's with us? We would like to bring Korban Pesach. Now, in order simply to sustain the other two views, so at least from the point of view of the Nadav and Avihu, there is a machloket. What does it mean, Vahi Bayom HaShmini? And it was on the 8th day, that was the opening ceremony of the inauguration of the Mishkan, and that's when the tragedy of Nadav and Avihu happens. What is the date of Vahi Bayom HaShmini? So we grew up with Rashi, and Rashi is echoing the sentiment of some of Chazal in the Midrash, that the 7 preparatory days, the Shivat Yemei HaMiluim, began a week before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So Vahi Bayom HaShmini, it was the 8th day from the beginning of the 7 preparatory days. And that's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. But Rabbi Akiva believed otherwise. He said that the Shivat Yemei HaMiluim, the 7 days of preparation, began on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And now count to the 8th day, Vahi Bayom HaShmini, it's the 8th of Nisan. And Rabbi Akiva says that's the day of the deaths of Nadav and Avihu. Now count out 7 days, you're already into Pesach. There is no halachic way that these El Tzafan and Mishael could become Tohorim before Pesach. And even with the Aronot Shel Yosef, there's discussion why, to try to respond to why they could not possibly have become Tohorim before Pesach. In final analysis, we have these 3 views. So what do you do with these 3 views? What's so important, whether it was A, B, or C, whether it was Aronot Shel Yosef, the ones who carried the coffin of Yosef, whether it was Mishael and Tzafan, the ones who buried Nadav and Avihu, or whether it's just anybody who sustained the loss of an immediate relative. Why would this be important? So to this end, we're going to go back to the first source on page 1 and try to see something about the unique halacha of Pesach Sheini. The fundamental question would be, we know that Yom Tov, as we know it, Eile Moadei Hashem Mikra'ei Kodesh, Asher Tikru Otam B'Moadam. That's the schedule of the Chagim in Vayikra Kav Gimel and Parshat Emor. These are the Chagim. It's interesting that the first Chag on the list is Shabbat. That's a shir in itself. Why the Torah refers to Shabbat as a Chag, and we echo it in Kiddush Friday night when we say Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. It's not only Zikaron L'Maseh Bereshit, but it's also Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. Ki hu Yom Tchila L'Mikra'ei Kodesh. It's first on the list of Mikra'ei Kodesh. When you say Kiddush Friday night, that's what we're saying. Because the parsha begins, Eile Moadei Hashem Mikra'ei Kodesh. Here is the list of the Chagim. And it begins with Sheshet Yamim Tasam Lachta. It begins with Shabbat. That's the first thing. And if you have a shir on the difference between the first set of Aseret Dibrot in Yitro and the second, Parshat V'etchanan, you see clearly that in Yitro the theme is creation. Okay, and there it says Al Kain Beirach, but it says Zachot Yam Shabbat L'Kasho, Sheish Yam Tavod, and so on. And it says there that it's all about creation. In the second Dibrot in V'etchanan, it's all about Yitziat Mitzrayim. V'zacharta ki everita v'eretz Mitzrayim. So we echo. So that's the Yom Tov part of the Shabbat that's there as well. But then it goes according to calendar order. It's Pesach, Sfirat HaOmer, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and it ends with Vaydaber Moshe et Moadei Hashem el Bnei Yisrael. That's in a nutshell Vayikra Kav Gimel. Pesach Sheini is not there, which already tells us that maybe it's not a Chag at all. In order for it to be a Chag in the Chumash, it must necessarily be a Chag for all of Klal Yisrael. You can't have a private Chag mentioned in the schedule of the Chagim, of Moadei Yisrael. Eile Moadei Hashem Mikrei Kodesh, Vaydaber Moshe el Bnei Yisrael. You can't have anything private. And it's possible that Pesach Sheini is private. What does it mean private? It means it's not relevant for the masses of Klal Yisrael. Because there's an interesting halacha. If you have a scenario where the majority of Am Yisrael are Tmeim Meit, like for example, our situation today. Our situation today, where we assume that the majority of Am Yisrael is Tmeim. Most of us have attended once in our lifetime a Levaya. We've gone to an Askara, we've gone to a funeral parlor, we've been in a hospital to visit somebody who may have ourselves been sick, where somebody in the hospital died. We don't know, but the assumption is that we're all Tmei Mate. Perhaps you have some infants who the mother gave birth at home and never saw a hospital in his life. You can have a handful of people who may not be Tmei Mate, but the assumption is there's a chazakah, there's an assumption that we are Tmei Mate. The halacha is Tuma hutra b'tzibur. If the majority of Am Yisrael is Tamei, then you go for the Korban Pesach while you're Tmeim. You don't have to have Pesach Sheini. You offer the Korban Pesach in the month of Nisan. So why don't we do it today? You don't have to have a Beis Hamikdash, but you're close. You're close. You have to have who said Mizbeach? Mizbeach, you're even closer. You have to know the location of the Mizbeach. And by the way, there are people who are fairly good at calculating where the Mizbeach would be. It's a little bit of a machloket like everything else, but we can get pretty close to the absolute location of the Mizbeach. If we would have a location of the Mizbeach, then one Korban Pesach could be offered today on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael, even though we're Tmeim. This is not my chidush. Rabbi Kiva Eger said it 150 years ago. Except that today, you can't even daven mincha on Har HaBayit. Can you imagine if you walk up there with a shepsala on Erev Pesach? It's been tried, right. And then you're tried and put in jail. Right, I wouldn't tell you to do it. There are reasons, there are security reasons, political reasons that we don't do this today. But not halachic reasons. That we, as Tameim mate, we as Am Yisrael could offer one Korban Pesach if we would be certain exactly the location of the Mizbeach, without a Mizbeach and without Beit HaMikdash. But this is the principle of Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. And in such case, Am Yisrael does not push anything to the second month. It's offered in Nisan. Who has and when is Pesach Sheini relevant? When the majority of Am Yisrael are Tohorim. They're spiritually pure and can offer the Korban Pesach in Nisan, but there's a minority who are Tmei Emet, and they cannot bring the Korban Pesach in Nisan in its time. They have a mitzvah of Korban Pesach in the second month, which means that by definition, the Yom Tov of, if you want to call it a Yom Tov, the halachot of Pesach Sheini is not relevant for all of Klal Yisrael, by definition, and hence cannot be a Yom Tov. It's not considered a Yom Tov at all. That's why it's not in Vayikra Kav Gimel. It's not Moedei Hashem. There's no Isa Malacha. There's no particular mitzvah associated with it. So what is it? So in source number one, you have the Sefer HaChinuch, who gives us the mitzvah schedule. Now, of course, the mitzvah schedule, basically he takes the Rambam's Sefer HaMitzvot, Book of Mitzvot, which the Rambam builds at around the 613, 248 positives and 365 negatives. What the Sefer HaChinuch does, he does a different spread. He simply starts with Parshat HaShavua, because his objective is to give a type of Torah tidbits to his teenage son and friends, so they have something to do on Shabbos afternoon instead of playing marbles. And literally, he writes this. He wants them, instead of playing, they should have something for Parshat HaShavua. It's a Parsha page. And it came out in segments. And it, after many, many years, becomes a book. So it's a book called Sefer Chinuch, and that's why we don't know who the author is. Because when a father writes to a son, he doesn't name himself. He refers to B'ni, my son, my son, my son, my son, all the time. But we don't have a clue. We have a clue, but we don't know exactly who he is. We do know he's 13th century Barcelona, from the Beit Midrash of the Ramban. And it's interesting that he adopts the list of the Rambam's 613, even though he's a student in the Beit Midrash of the Ramban. And that is because less than 100 years after the Rambam dies, the Rambam's stature in Am Yisrael becomes superhuman in a Torah sense, and his list becomes the most authoritative. So what the author of Sefer Chinuch will do, he will bring the mitzvah as it's documented and formulated by the Rambam, and then he'll make a marginal comment, and the Ramban differs. This and that, whatever, because there are at least 26 different mitzvot that the Ramban takes issue with the Rambam. So he brings, that's why in Sefer Chinuch, there's no mitzvah about living in Eretz Yisrael, because it's not in the Rambam. It's only in the Ramban's list. So the Sefer Chinuch doesn't have it. And so many other differences. So what do we have here in Mitzvah Shin Pei? This is after the Sefer Chinuch in Parshat Bo spoke about 20 mitzvot in Parshat Bo that had to do with remembering the Exodus from Egypt. the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach and this of Korban Pesach and this, and there's so many details that each one itself is an independent mitzvah. And by the 16th mitzvah, the author of Sefer Chinuch apologizes why he's repeating and explaining why the Torah has to give so many different mitzvot leading to the same theme, basically. That by having miracles, it substantiates creation of the world, that providence in the world. And he repeats it again, and then he keeps saying, as above, as above, as above. And he realizes that he's repeating himself, so he has to explain why we have to have so many mitzvot. And this is where he has his famous saying, Ki acharei halevavot nimshachot hapulot. Acharei hapulot nimshachot halevavot. You should correct me. Acharei hapulot nimshachot halevavot means that if you have involved in action, that is going to dictate your ideology, and not the other way around. Some people think, okay, let me understand the ideology, and after that, I'll act accordingly. Sefer Chinuch says just the opposite. First, we have to be engaged in activity, and the Torah wanted us to be heavily engaged in activity that revolves around Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, so that we really understand the depths of it. And here in Parshat Ba'alotcha, in Mitzvah Shin Pei, which is 380 in the list of 613, it says Mitzvah Pesach Sheni Ba'arba'asar B'Iyar, and he just describes the mitzvah as I did. I'm not going to read it, but I want to get to that last line underlined. He explains Lefi Shehu Yesod Gadol Badat, because this is so important. What he does here in Parshat Ba'alotcha, he restates everything he said already in Parshat Bo, why it's important to have multitude of mitzvot revolving around Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. So he gets to the point, and at the end he says, and because this is such a fundamental point in our fundamental idea in our religion, Higia chiyuv gam kein af al hager shenitgayer ben Pesach Rishon l'Sheni v'chein katan shehigdil ben shnei apsachim shechayivim lasot Pesach Sheni. Says we understand. Not only do we understand why a person who missed it in Chodesh Nisan, the month of Nisan, why the Torah gives him another opportunity a month later to make it up, because this is really, really important, the Korban Pesach. But we have an interesting scenario. A non-Jew who converts to Judaism on Yom Ha'atzmaut, on the 5th of Iyar, between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni is the 14th of Iyar. Does he have to bring a Korban Pesach in Iyar? Is Pesach Sheni determined by those who did not bring it in Pesach Rishon but were obligated to bring it in Pesach Rishon? Or once a person was not there in Nisan for any reason, and now he is a Jew in the second month in Iyar, he will have to bring the Korban Pesach. So this is what Sefer Chinuch takes a halachic stand. A ger, shenit gayer, a person who converts between the two Pesachs, that is between the 15th of Nisan and the 14th of Iyar, he will have to bring the Korban Pesach Sheni, and a Bar Mitzvah boy between Pesach and Pesach Sheni. Because when he was under Bar Mitzvah, he was a katan. He was not obligated in mitzvot. Now he's obligated in mitzvot, so he has to bring a Pesach Sheni. This is what the Sefer Chinuch says here. Now, those are Daf Yomi persuasions who've learned Psachim several times over know that this is not a closed case. Sefer Chinuch is taking a stand on an opinion that's found in the Gemara. And to that end, we're going to see what these it's actually three opinions. It's three opinions. If you look at the second page, in source number 4. Source number 4. I want to start from the middle of the source. It's the third line in the middle. It says Detanya. It says in a Braita. Ger shenitgayer ben shnei psachim, a convert who converts between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. V'chein katan shigdil ben shnei psachim, a boy who became bar mitzvah, became an adult, a gadol between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Chayav lasot Pesach Sheni, will be obligated that year to bring the Pesach Sheni in the month of Iyar. Divrei Rabbi, this is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's opinion. But Rabbi Natan says, not so. Kol shezakuk l'rishon, zakuk l'sheni. Whoever was obligated in the first month, in Nisan, that person, if circumstances had it that he did not bring it, he will bring it in the second month. Zakuk l'sheni. Kol sheino zakuk l'rishon. Whoever was not there as an obligated individual in Nisan, ein zakuk l'sheni, does not have to bring the Korban Pesach in the month of Iyar. But my kami palge, what's really governing this machloket? So Rebbe, who said that the ger and the katan will have to bring the Korban Pesach Sheni, he believes that Sheini is Regel B'fnei Atzmo. It's an independent Chag. Has nothing to do with Pesach in the month of Nisan. It's a new halachic entity created in Parshat Balotcha for a specific audience, and it's a minority of Klal Yisrael. That's it. And the question is, whoever was not there for whatever reason and wants to be part of the Korban Pesach scenario of that year, and you were not there in Pesach Rishon, either because you were Tamei, or you were far away, or because of any other reason, and any other reason means, well, I was a goy, or any other reason, well, I was under bar mitzvah. Whatever it is, we're not asking you questions. Why? Nobody's asking you why. You weren't there. Line up in the month of Iyar, and you can have a Pesach, Korban Pesach in Iyar. Regel b'fnei atzmo. It's an independent chag. Rabbi Natan argues and says, no. He believes that Sheini tashlumin derishon. Tashlumin in halachic language means a makeup. We have it with regard to davening. You miss Shachris, so you can have two Shmones Reis for Mincha. The first for Mincha, the second one makeup for Shachris, and so on. There are concepts in halacha that are called tashlumin. Not everything can you make up. There's a phrase called avar zmano batel korbano. You missed it, you missed it. The time factor is beyond us. Fine, but there are some halachic frameworks that allow for some degree of makeup. And this is one of them, says Rabbi Natan. Torah says you can make it up. You have a second chance. In the university here, if you missed the exam, you have mo'ed bet, the second opportunity to take the finals, to take the exams. That's tashlumin. But it's tashlumin, but tikunei l'rishon lo matkin. It's not really a correction, but the word correction is incorrect translation. It's atonement. It's not atonement. It wasn't good. Of course, for the goy, there's nothing to talk about. But a person who was, let's say, derech ruchoka, and he could have come to Yerushalayim for Pesach, but, he was a lazy. He didn't bother to make the trip to Yerushalayim. Figure, at an Iyar, there's less traffic getting into the old city than in Nisan, so I'll come the second time, right? So you're going to have a sin. That's not a good thing to do. So Rabbi Natan says, look, you can make it up, but it's not kapara for the first time. But on that view, there's actually another opinion. Rab Chananya ben Akavya says, Sheini is not only tashlumin, but it's takanta derishon. It atones for the fact that you didn't bring the Korban Pesach in the first month. So basically you have two opinions that now divide into three, because the second opinion subdivides. The first opinion is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who says that Pesach Sheini is a completely independent, newly created halachic framework. Regel b'fnei atzmo. Rabbi Natan and Chananya ben Akavya believe, no. Pesach Sheini is an extension of Pesach Rishon, and the only difference between the two of them is, does the second Pesach atone for the first? Not a small matter, but in principle, Pesach Sheini is linked to Pesach Rishon. So whoever was there for Pesach Rishon in terms of obligation, like any old Jew, so that person who didn't bring the Korban Pesach in Nisan brings it in Iyar. But a goy, a person not Jewish, or a child under bar mitzvah who is not obligated, so that person has no obligation for Pesach Sheni because there's nothing to make up. You can't make up something that you weren't obligated in the first place. So that's the fundamental machloket, and I say it's a basic machloket of two, which then view number two divides into A and B. So it almost becomes three views. If you take a look at the Rambam in source number 5, he takes a stand on this. And his last line he says, She'ein hasheni tashlumin larishon el regel b'fnei atzmo. Rambam adopts the view of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And that means it's not surprising that the author of the Sefer HaChinuch tells us that a goy and a child who becomes bar mitzvah between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni will be obligated in Pesach Sheni because he will also follow in the footsteps of Rambam if it's an independent Yom Tov. If it's an independent Yom Tov, then everybody's on board. Not only those who are Tme'im and those who are far away, but also those anybody who was not there for any old reason. You were a goy, fine. You were a child, fine. Now you're adult, now you're Jewish, you bring the Korban Pesach. So the Sefer Chinuch, and this is not surprising at all, is in line with the Rambam's view. If you just take a look at the next page, the second part of source number 5, it's halacha bet, it's page 3, the first halacha. So here, on the last line, there's a comment of Ravid, Rabbi Avraham ben David, underlined. Who is the Ravid? Rabbi Avraham ben David. He's an older contemporary of the Rambam in the 12th century, from Provence, from southern France. And he got a hold of an early manuscript, almost a pre-sale, if you may, before the Mishnah Torah really went public and big time. The Ravid got a hold of an early manuscript of the Rambam. And he doesn't know who the Rambam is. He sees this Egyptian Ben Torah, Moshe ben Maimon, claiming with great audacity that he's writing about everything. Kol ha-Torah kula. And nobody ever did that before. To write a sefer about all of Torah? So the Ravid says, all right, let me see what this Bechurchik has to say. And he starts flipping through the pages, and he writes marginal notes, taking issue. 90% of the comments of the Ravid is taking issue. Sometimes it's a comment, but most of the time it's an argument. But he doesn't argue forcefully in the sense, I think this because such and such. He'll write, Ze hevel, this is narishkeit. Ze einot nachon, this is not true, this is not right. I mean, he'll make these comments that, just stab the Rambam right in the back. And many of the later of the Rishonim and Achronim had to struggle to understand what was bothering the Ravid. Why did he say what he said? But here, the Ravid actually cues us into what was on his mind. He says, why did the Rambam decide like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? You've got two names against the one. Whereas Rabbi Natan says it's tashlumin, makeup, and Rabbi Hananya ben Akavia says it's takanta, tikkun, it's kapara, it's atonement, but fundamentally they're both saying the same thing against Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. That's 2 against 1. And 2 against 1, majority rules, Yachid v'Rabim, halacha ke'Rabim, the halacha cannot be like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So he takes issue. So you have now a machloket. Do you know really what the machloket is? Is Pesach Sheini a communal issue or is it a private issue? If you adopt Rabbi Avraham ben David Ravid's understanding that take into consideration the view of makeup, tashlumin, and tikkun kapara, what you're basically saying is that Pesach Sheini is a derivative of Pesach Rishon. It nurtures spiritually, halachically, from that first Pesach. And the first Pesach, everybody agrees, is communal. That's not a question. So if there's a little bit of a tangent that spills off from Pesach Rishon, it also has that character of being a communal type of idea, of a tzibur. Whereas according to the Rambam, Pesach Sheni has nothing at all to do with Pesach Rishon, and hence it's a chovat yachid, it's an individual, just for those who are in the situation that have to bring the Korban Pesach. It has nothing to do with Klal Yisrael. In a word, this impacts on whether today Tachnun should be said or not. Because Tachnun is not deleted on private matters. Now you're going to tell me, one second, they're making a Brit in Shul, and the moyel and the father and the sandak and whatever, and the shul's not saying Tachnun. That's not because it's a private Yom Tov. It's because the halacha says that a Brit is a communal Yom Tov. We're all part of it. We all become part of it. So too, if a chatan comes to shul in Sheva Brachot, so it's not a private matter. All right, mazel tov, fine, No. A chatan and shul, in the Sheva Brachot themselves, we expand the private simcha to Mehera Yishama Hashem Elokeinu Barei Yehuda v'chutzot Yerushalayim Kol Sason Kol Simcha. It's a communal matter. And the proof is, you have to have a minyan for Sheva Brachot. And once you have to have a minyan, that means Klal Yisrael. So it's a simcha of the tzibur, and that's why you don't say Tachnun. I remember there was a shul that a bunch of Litvaks, they're in love with saying Tachnun. There was a chassan and told him to daven at home. And you know who said this? The Mishnah Brura. The Chavetz Chaim recommends that a chassan shouldn't stay home. He should stay home for a week because nebuch, the shul's not going to say Tachnun. Whereas my neighborhood in Katamon, we have the Shtibluch for Mincha, so there's a moyel who still has britot in the afternoon. There's a tug-of-war between the 3 minyanim to bring him into my room of the mincha, because we're going to save 30 seconds on not saying Tachnun for a weekday. That's what it is. Now, I once had in Ramot a scenario where it was mincha in the afternoon, and somebody informed me that there's Zvat Nashim upstairs. There was a kala in Sheva Brachot. Do we skip Tachnun or not? So I said, 1 second, where's the chatan? What do you mean there's a kala? You think it's funny? So there was a Meiser Shahaya at YU, Yeshiva University, Rav David Lifshitz, Zechor Lebracha, one of the great Rosh Yeshiva. And a fellow got married, a fellow from the Shir, and 3 days later he came to Shir. And Rav David looked at him, he got angry, and he says, you're not allowed to be for this week without your kala. So the next day he came to Shir with the kala. Meiser Shahaya. Then Rav David couldn't say anything, you know. And that's a halacha. So I was wondering, where's the the chosin? I mean, the kala is there. So the question is, what's the din? So first thing I realized, it was Mincha Erev Rosh Chodesh, so we didn't say Tachnan anyway, so I didn't have to break my head over this one. But this boils down to the machloket, whether a woman in the Ezrat Nashim becomes part and parcel of the tzibur. That's an issue. That's an issue. Is she incorporated into the concept of a tzibur? Which our Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik Rav, was in favor, Rav Henkin was in favor. Any Rav that paskins that a woman from Ezrat Nashim can say a Kaddish must necessarily adopt the opinion that the woman becomes part and parcel of the tzibur. And if the woman is part and parcel of the tzibur, there's no reason why the kahal should not delete tachnun if the kala is there without the chatan. What? He said he davened mincha earlier, so where was the kala for that mincha? He was in Rav Lifshitz shir, right. That was the first day, right. So if you say that, like the Rambam, which was the dominant opinion in halacha for years, that Pesach Sheini is an individual issue, it's a chovat yachid, so it has nothing to do with our saying tachnun or not. It's a private matter. So Yud Daled Iyar is just another day, no different than Yud Gimel the day before and Tetvav the day after. But if you adopt the opinion that Pesach Sheini it nurtures spiritually, halachically, from Pesach Rishon, then you can make a little bit of a case that there's something corporate or tziburi about Pesach Sheini as well, that perhaps as a reminder for Beit HaMikdash, there's some type of quasi-Yom Tov. And that began first in the 19th century. I'm not going to say that this is linked to the atmosphere of Shivat Zion, which begins in the 19th century. That I'll leave to your imagination. But it's the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Chil Mecha Levi Epstein, who dies in the 1880s, the father of the Torah Tzmima. So he writes there, after giving the list of the days that we don't say Tachnun, so the Rambam has a very, very stingy list, and then Shulchan Aruch expands the list, and then the Ramah expands it even more. But Pesach Sheni is not there. It's just not there. The Aruch HaShulchan says, I don't understand why Pesach Sheni is not there, but the Sfardim don't say Tachnun on Pesach Sheni. And I'm not sure, did he mean Eidot HaMizrach, North African Jews, which I'm not sure he had any contact with them in Navarduk, or did he mean Chassidim who daven Nusach Svard, which makes a lot more sense, that he was acquainted with the Chassidic movement in Eastern Europe already in his day. And we all know by Chassidim, deletion of Tachnun is the first mitzvah in the Aseret HaDibrot. It's a... some Rebbe's yahrzeit. Do you know that I have a calendar that has every Rebbe's yahrzeit, and thank God every single day is covered, except for the 5th of Iyar. No Rebbe ever died on Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's amazing. And there was a shtibel in Borough Park that said Tachnun once a year on Hey Iyar, so nobody should suspect, God forbid, that they were deleting Tachnun because it was Yom Ha'atzmaut. The only day a year. Okay, but this is the Tachnun story. But let's get back to our issue. You have a few minutes. So what does it have to do with the parsha? So we have these three views, and I contend that these three views on the halachic understanding of the essence of Pesach Sheni, an independent Yom Tov, regel b'fnei atzmo, a makeup, tashlumin, or tikkun or kapara, atonement, reflects upon the three possibilities of the identity. Who were those who came to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, Lama nigara? So let's try to examine this. If we start with Arono Shel Yosef. Arono Shel Yosef, if you go back to source number, if you go to source number 7. Source number 7. It says, Vahi anashim asher tmeim nefesh adam. Otam anashim, who are they? Nosei Arono Shel Yosef. They were carrying the coffin of Yosef. All right. So what kind of Pesach Sheni did these people receive? What kind of Pesach Sheni did they receive? If you look at source 8, the Rambam is dealing with, of all things, the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. Now, he doesn't count it as part of the 613, but you shouldn't think for a moment the Rambam didn't believe in it. The Rambam tells us that there are 3 gradations of the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. The best, the medium, and better than nothing. I don't want to call it the worst. Better than nothing. If we want to translate this into Baba Kama terms, Idit, Benunit, and Ziburit. Right? Best, middle, and worst. The best is Shochein be'Eretz Yisrael. Right? Amru Chachamim, Kol Shochein be'Eretz Yisrael, Avonotav mechulim. Special schut to live in Eretz Yisrael. Fine, he gives a pasuk. Second best, second line, and this is based on a Gemara Masechet Ketubot Kuf Yud Aleph. Afilu halachba arba amot zocher lechayei olam haba. You just walked 4 amot. In American language, that's 6 to 8 feet. Or better yet, translated, tourism. Tourism. You have people who've come on Aliyah, or people who are born here and live here, and then people who visit here, and visit regularly, and walk a lot more than 4 amot in Eretz Yisrael. I once asked by one of my great Rabbeim, Rav Shechter from YU, when he was here for a visit, the opportunity to give him a tramp, a hitchhike, I said, when you're driving in the car, do you fulfill the Dalet Amot on wheels? And you might think this is just a funny, awkward question. But you know, the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel has to be done by foot. A person who limps is exempt from the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel, Chiger. You have to be a healthy, walking person to have that obligation. And perhaps this extends itself for walking the land in Eretz Yisrael. Kol ha'olech Dalet Amot. So Rav Shechter says, as a davar pashut, even in the car, you get the mitzvah. Fine, okay, so we left it at that. Right. Even on a tourist bus, you get the mitzvah. But it means seeing the land. The Talmud Yerushalmi in Masechet Kiddushin, while discussing acquisition of field, said in Eretz Yisrael, if you just walk haloch v'chazor, back and forth, you acquire the land without any other form of kinyan, as it says, kum hitalech ba'aretz le'orka u'le'rochba ki lecha etnena. The very walking. So that's tourism. I don't want to shock you, but you know that 80% of American Jewry have never been here even to visit once. 80%. And the 20% who've been here 50,000 times over. Right. Because they have mishpacha, no mishneh. But there's only 20% that have been here. 80% have never ever come to Israel. It's amazing. Kol ha'olech Dalet Amot. And then there's the least, the better than nothing, and that is a person who's never been here at all, but he requests Gfura, burial in Eretz Yisrael. And on that, there were 2 opinions in the Gemara. One opinion says, excuse me, thank you, but no thank you. You're coming to Koma Miyut, it says. V'olech etchem Koma Miyut. Don't come in a coffin just to add Tumah to Eretz Yisrael. Keep your Tumah in Chutz La'aretz. You didn't want to come to Eretz Yisrael to do one mitzvah, to daven one mincha here, but to be buried in Eretz Yisrael? That's one opinion. And the other opinion is, one second. There's a special schut of being buried in Eretz Yisrael as if you're being buried under the Mizbeach. V'chiper admato amo. It's something that's valuable. And the Rambam struggles between these 2 opinions. And he works it out by saying, you know what, bottom line, it's a good thing. Kfura ba'aretz. Tzei ulmad, look at the last line of source number 8. Tzei ulmad, it's a madrashic form that the Rambam used. Mi Yaakov Avinu v'Yosef HaTzadik. You see, Yaakov, he asked for Kfura in Eretz Yisrael. Yosef asked for Kfura in Eretz Yisrael. You see, it's good for the Jews. Now, why does the Rambam add Yosef? He could have derived the idea from Yaakov alone. Yaakov. Of course, the answer is, Yaakov dies in Mitzrayim and is never buried in Mitzrayim. So he asked for a funeral that's going to take him all the way to the Marat HaMachpelah. With Yosef, it's a novel idea. It's a chidush. Yosef dies in Mitzrayim and is buried in Mitzrayim. So what is he asking for? Reinterment. Who said that you're allowed to open up the grave and reinter a body in Eretz Yisrael? And that's a subject in Shulchan Aruch. When and under what conditions are you allowed to open up a grave and reinter? So Rav Moshe Feinstein has a whole tshuva in Igrot Moshe when they brought the bones of Moshe Montefiore. And he thought it wasn't a good idea. And he writes that, what do you think? All the Gdolim asked to be reinterred? It wasn't so. But some did. In 1998, Reb Shmuel Moilever, who was a great religious Zionist leader of the 19th century, was reinterred 100 years after his death, on his 100th yard site. He was reinterred. Reb Meir Shapiro Zatzal, from the Chachmei Lublin Yeshiva, was reinterred. He was buried in the new cemetery of Lublin. He's now buried in Har Menuchot. There were Gedolei Yisrael who were reinterred. Not everybody, but some did. And that is derived from Yosef. What does that mean? That Kfura Ba'aretz is important, to be buried in Eretz Yisrael, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that. They bury in Chutz La'aretz. There's a second opportunity possible. There's a tashlumin possible. you can have a makeup. The grave can be opened up and the body can be reinterred in Eretz Yisrael. And who understood this better than anyone else? The ones who were carrying the coffin of Yosef. They understood it. Because this was a reinterment. And they came to Moshe and they said, what about us, Pesach Sheini? And God said, all right, you'll get a Pesach Sheini. That's going to have the trimmings of Tashlumin, makeup. That's going to be your Pesach Sheini. And then there were those who just had sustained a death in the family. Somebody died. We don't know who. We don't care even. But there was Meit Mitzvah. And to use the biblical phrase from Parshat Naso of that kind of shock, Ki yavo alav meit befeta pitom, out of nowhere, out of nowhere. I once spoke about this in Ramot, in my shul there, about Yom Kippur, of where we say Adam Yisodо me'afar v'sofo le'afar, the tail end of Natan HaTokev. Mashul, there's a comparison to Cheres HaNishbar, right? A vessel that smashes, but then there's Seil Over, Anan Kala, and Chalom Ya'uf. There's 7 different expressions of temporalness of man. What is this all about? The answer is that people leave this world differently. Some people die gradually, they're sick, but they go on for another week and another month. Finally they die. It's almost like the shadow, Kitzel Over. You don't see a noticeable difference from minute to minute. But after a few hours, you notice that it moved. Kitzel Over. That's one way. But then there's also Kicheres HaNishbar. Unfortunately, we have too much experience here in Alon Shvut, in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, and now throughout the world, of a human being who's perfectly healthy and is a victim of a terrorist act. In one split second, the person is gone. Gone. Kicheres HaNishbar. Ki yavo alav meit befeta pitom. Just happens. And they came to Moshe Rabbeinu. Everything was going right. All our Pesach preparations were in order. And now, a day before Pesach, this had to hit us. What's going to be with Korban Pesach? They felt they were entered into a new situation that they did not have 5 minutes before. The Kadosh Baruch Hu said, fine, we'll give you another Pesach that will be defined as a regel b'fnei atzmo. It's going to be a new situation. You went into a new situation, you asked properly, you'll get a Yom Tov that's also going to be a new situation. Regel b'fnei atzmo. And that leaves the third view of Mishael and El Tzafan. I don't have time to go into the whole parsha of Sheini, but and Rabbi Leibowitz elaborates on this. If you take note, where the Torah uses the same phrase of accepting of the korbanot, of the ceremony of the Mishkan inauguration, V'teitze eish milifnei Hashem, v'tochal et ha'olah, v'et ha'chalavim, the fire consumed the animals, and they sang. Next thing you know, Vayakrivu eish zara lifnei Hashem, asher lo tziva otam, v'teitze eish milifnei Hashem, v'tochal otam. The exact same phrase, v'teitze eish milifnei Hashem, v'tochal. 2 psukim earlier, the eish, the fire, consumed the korbanot. 2 psukim later, the same phrase exists, and it consumes Nadav and Avihu. So what went wrong? Ezara. There are a million explanations what the Ezara is. But you can sometimes figure out the pshat from the trup, the ta'amim. There's a mercha kfula. It's a rare tam. Asher lo tziva otam. The Baal Koreh should read it. Darga asher lo tziva otam. Different variations of it, but that's what the lo is. It almost like repeats the lo. Why? This is the opening of the Mishkan. This Mishkan, according to Rashi, was going to be the atonement for the Egel HaZahav. And that's why the Egel is mentioned at the beginning of Parshat Sheini. And Aaron HaKohen is now told that everything has to be done exactly. There will be no toleration of any type of distortion from the exactness of the mitzvah. No toleration whatsoever. And here Nadav Avihu deviate. Vayakrivu lefnei Hashem eish zara. This was not part of the schedule. It was uncalled for. Asher lo tzivautam. Not this, not this, not this. Vateitzei eish milifnei Hashem vatochal otam. What happened was, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not have reacted as he did, everything about the kapara, the atonement for Chet HaEgel, would have gone down the river. Everything would have collapsed. And the only thing that saves Am Yisrael from that, and ultimately receiving the kapara, is that Nadav and Avihu become swept up as part of the korbanot of the day. And they symbolize the kapara, the atonement. Vateitzei eish milifnei Hashem vatochal otam. Who understood this better than anyone else but Mishael and El-Tzafan, who were asked by Moshe Rabbeinu to bring them to Kfura, holding the body, burying the body. And they came to Moshe and they said, what about Pesach Sheini? And Moshe said, you know what? Kadosh Baruch Hu said you'll have a Pesach Sheini that will have all the flavoring of kapara, of atonement. You have three different views in the Medrash identifying who the Anashim are, and three different halachic points of view of the essence of Pesach Sheini, and they can be correlated to each other, the first, the second, and the third. And just to wrap up, in Divrei Hayamim Bet, Perek Lamed, there's a scene of Chizkiah HaMelech. Chizkiah HaMelech has made unbelievable religious revival to Am Yisrael. And he wants to make a festive occasion by bringing everybody to Beit HaMikdash for Pesach. And he just can't get everybody purified. And the problem was not just Tumat Meid, but if a person is engaged in Avodah Zarah, he also has to have Para Aduma to purify himself, to be ready for Korban Pesach. And the line was too long. They couldn't do it. So they said to the Melech, let's push it off by a month. And the Novitz in Divrei Yomim says, and that year, they made the Pesach Sheini in the second month. So Chazal say, 1 second. That's not what Pesach Sheini is. Pesach Sheini is just the Korban Pesach. Because what does it say there? It says they made 7 days in Iyar. In Iyar, 7 days? And they had Chag HaMatzot with it? That doesn't make sense at all. So there's an opinion in Chazal. What he really did was, he did an extra Adar when it was already Nisan. Normally, if the leap year is Adar Rishon, Adar Sheni. Here it was already beginning of Nisan, and he threw in an extra month. So in essence, the Pesach was in Nisan, but it was like the second Nisan. But it wasn't the Iyar, something like that. But there is one of the Achronim on the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin. His name is Rashash, Rabbi Shmuel Strassen. He asks a question. He says, I don't understand this. Why is it 7 days? And he's just examining the psukim. 7 days. Pesach Sheni is 1 day, as we said. It's not 7 days. So our Rabbi Rav Soloveitchik gave a dynamite answer. The difference between a day and a week is the difference between marking time for a private matter in halacha and a national matter. A private matter, like a birthday, to determine when a brit is, to determine when a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, to determine a yard site, it's a 24-hour framework. Person born at 2 in the afternoon, his bar mitzvah is not 2 in the afternoon. His bar mitzvah is the night before when the calendar day changes. Person dies at 2 in the afternoon, the yard site is that date beginning from the night before. It's a 24-hour framework. But a national commemoration is a week. That's why Pesach is a week. That's why Sukkot is a week. And Shavuot, by the way, is just an extension of Pesach, by the way. It's the 8th day of Pesach. Chazal called it Atzeret. It's bound by the bridge called Svirat Omer. So it's not even a Yom Tov on its own, even though we called it a Yom Tov on its own. But it's part of Pesach. It says it's a type of Shmini Atzeret. Just like you have Shmini Atzeret, so you have the Shmini, but it's just 6 weeks later. But the Yom Tov is 7 days. It's 7 days Pesach and 7 days Sukkot, which is the same 7, by the way. Sukkot is Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's bridged halachically by the number 1515, the 15th of Tishrei and 15th of Nisan. What Chizkiah did here was so extraordinary. He said that this will not be a normal Pesach Sheni for the individual, but this will be a Pesach Sheni for all of Klal Yisrael. And because it's a Pesach Sheni for all of Klal Yisrael, then we have to have it for a week. And we'll celebrate it for a full week. And the Novi says at the end of Divrei Yamim, V'tehi simcha gedola b'Yerushalayim, and Emir Hashem, kein tiyad lanu u'lechol Beit Yisrael.